All right, that was a great visit with Pat Narduzzi. They're the defending ACC champ, and they're the 7th different team to represent the Coastal in the ACC Championship game since 2013. They're trying to become the first to defend as champ since Virginia Tech did it a million years ago, it feels like. But I think there's actually going to be significant competition coming out of that division. I think it's one of the more improved divisions in college football here heading in to this year. Let's look at a couple teams that might have something to say about Pitt's trip back to the ACC Championship. Let's start with the U. All right. Bad news, good news. We've been doing this for a couple days. Let's keep it going there. We'll start with the bad news. The conversation about Miami is the U back? Well, I loved what Mario Cristobal had to say about it. He said, well, the U is back to work. That's what they have to do. Look, Miami's had one 10-win season in 18 years. They've had one bowl win since 2006 and has yet to win the ACC since they joined the league. Well, in steps Mario Cristobal, who already has multiple conference championships under his belt at Oregon. He's got a Rose Bowl win. He's got a 10-year contract, and it feels like he's got an unparalleled track record as a recruiter. But that doesn't happen overnight. You can't wave the magic wand as a recruiter and as a program builder and all of a sudden expect your team to take the next step. So the conversation centering around, is the U back? The answer is no. The U is en route to being back. I really believe that. The other big question for me when it looks at Miami is that the best teams are built from the inside out. Well, why is it that Miami has struggled along the offensive line for the better part of the last decade? Maybe even longer if you want to dive a little bit deeper. Well, the good news is that you have now hired one of the best offensive line coaches in America who, at the same time, will be building your program. And it feels like a little bit, when you look at Miami's offensive line this year, they've been a little bit of a liability recently. There's no denying that. They've been an issue for the better part of the last several years, but it does feel like they have some talent coming back, so there's reason to think that they're going to take the next step. And then what do you think also when you think about Miami? I think about a great front seven defensively, right? All the great teams in the early 90s and the early 2000s, they had great personnel along the line of scrimmage defensively. Well, if you look at what they have right now, heading into last year and even into this year, the front seven defensively has not been what they've been in the past. You got to replace a couple key pieces along the defensive front. But another thing is that when you look at the linebackers, man, they missed 1 million tackles last year. Really, throughout the course of the entire season. I called the Michigan State game. It was as if Michigan State, their entire body was covered in Vaseline because Miami defenders are just slipping right off as would-be tacklers. They got to get that side figured out. Those are the three things that were bad news. But how about the good news? One, you have a great quarterback. Tyler Van Dyke, with what he did down the stretch last year, in his final 6 games, his worst passing performance included 316 yards and 3 touchdowns. Worst passing performance. I'd say it's a pretty good place to start. Think about the fact that he outdueled Kenny Pickett en route to a victory. You think about his coming out party against NC State, where he had 4 touchdowns in the upset. He might be poised to take a huge leap here as the unquestioned starter heading in to 2022. Offensive firepower, a little bit of a question at the top. Charleston Rambo, after what was an amazing year, he's now in the NFL. But you look at what they have at wide receiver and what they have at tight end, there's reason to believe there are so many pieces that might step up. You hear names like Jacoby George, who feels poised to jump. You think Frank Ladson, who's a transfer from Clemson, he might be poised to jump. Restrepo's back. Will Mallory's back. You have good pieces there at wide receiver. Just not sure exactly what the pecking order is going to be because it doesn't appear, at least right now, like there is that Charleston Rambo bona fide alpha dog #1 wide receiver. So they got to figure that out in fall camp. The good news is they have plenty of pieces to decide from. And finally, the best news, I think, for Miami this year, you have 2 phenomenal coordinators. Josh Gaddis, we've talked about him in previous episodes, what he's going to do to the offense, probably going to pick up. If you look at the offense last year, they were not a problem. They were able to do an awful lot of good things. Now, they got to be able to run the ball. They got to do better in that regard. But all things considered, the offense has been rock solid. Well, Josh Gaddis going to pick up from where Rhett Lashley left it. He's now the head coach at SMU. Rhett Lashley had things humming a little bit offensively there down the final stretch of the season. Gaddis steps in, going to put his own fingerprints on what they want to be offensively by using the RPO, by mixing in the run game, by being committed to the run game, hopefully with a different mentality physically along the offensive line. I think this offense has a chance to be just as good, if not better, in a lot of ways than last year. And then defensively, Kevin Steele steps in a little bit different from that of what Manny Diaz did in the past. Manny Diaz wants to make it helter-skelter, wants to throw a bunch of pieces at you, throw a bunch of pressures at you, and just cause a lot of communication issues, cause a lot of confusion amongst opposing offenses. Kevin Steele wants to be a little bit more predictable, a little bit more by the book. And if you look at his stops in the past, whether it be at Clemson, at Florida State, at Auburn, at Alabama, the guy has always been very sound defensively. You know that group's going to play well, and if they can have some pieces step up in the front seven, they'll be in great shape to, I think, be in the top half at very worst in the ACC defensively. Hopefully, they'll be much better than that. Maybe a top 2 or 3 unit by the time the season comes to a close. So that team was close last year, but do they have enough to get over the hump? Those are some of the reasons why they may or may not close the gap with the Pitt Panthers.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.